Hi, boys and girls. This is Grandma Sheilla, and our story today is called The 3-Ton Miracle. Well, it was that time of year when the hay needed to be cut. And 2 days before, Father had gone out and he'd cut all the alfalfa. And the next day, Alice's brother Ed had gone out and he had scooped that hay all together to make long rows. Well, now today, they were going to take the tractor and the stone boat. Now, a stone boat it's like a device that they used to make to haul the rocks out of the fields after they had worked the ground. And it was made with long, big poles. And then it had big boards hooked to the top of it, 2x6s. And they were put in with big spikes to hold them. And there were holes every so often where they had run chains through. And at the front of it, there was looped 2 heavier chains, and these were hooked to the back of the tractor. Well, it was a little bit difficult to pull that stone boat because it was so heavy and it didn't have any wheels. It just had those logs underneath of it. But Alice could do it. Now, Alice was 10 and her brother was 14. Dad was at work and it was supposed to rain that night. So Mother wanted to get the hay in. So Alice was driving the tractor. Mother and Ed were down in the field as Alice drove the tractor very, very, very slowly through the field. They would get those big bales of hay up on it, and they had a pitchfork so they could help lift up. When they got the bale up there, they could help lift it up and put it up on that stone boat. Well, it was a blistering hot day. Really, really hot. Alice, she was driving along with that tractor, and the tractor was vibrating. And the sun was shining down, and the sweat was rolling off of her face to the corner of her mouth. And oh, it was so hot. And she was almost falling asleep. Well, all of a sudden, she heard Ed yell, "Stop the tractor! Stop the tractor!" Well, now Alice was wide awake, and she put her foot on the clutch and she put her foot on the brake, and she stopped the tractor. And then Ed's voice rang out again, "Turn the tractor off!" So she killed the engine, and she jumped down off the tractor, and she looked. She couldn't see Ed, and she couldn't see Mother anywhere. Where were they? Well, she ran back around the back of the tractor, back to where that whole load of hay on that stone boat was. And then she saw her brother Ed kneeling on the ground. And when she got closer, she saw something she couldn't imagine have ever seen, and she didn't want to see it. Ed was saying, "Mother, shall I go get help? Mother." Well, when Alice had looked what she saw was that part of her mother was under that stone boat, and part of her was flat against those bales of hay. And then it was easy for Alice to see what had happened. Mother and Ed, as they were loading that hay, would jump up onto those boards and with the pitchforks put it up where it belonged. Now, yes, they had hay wagons, but the hay wagons were really far off the ground, and it was hard enough for Mother and Ed to get those big bales up. So of course they'd use the stone boat. Well, it appeared that Mother had jumped up onto those boards, and one of them had been rotten. Now that stone boat was built 10 years before. It was when Alice was a baby, and it was rotting. Well, when Mother landed on that board, the rotten wood just split open and made a hole, and Mother's foot and leg went down through that hole. And of course, the tractor was still moving then, and so it pulled Mother's leg all the way back underneath of that stone boat. And when it pulled her back, it put the rest of her body flat up against those bales of hay. It must have hurt something awful. Well, Mother answered Ed, and she said, "No, Ed, don't go get help. The men are all out in the fields. They're harvesting. You children are going to have to help your mother." How were they going to help? Mother said, "Now this is what I want you to do." But then she stopped and she said, "Let's ask Jesus to help us." So Mother prayed. And you know, the kids, they had looked at their mother and they said, "There's 3 tons of hay on this stone boat." And Mother had said, "I know. What I want you to do is to get a hold of the logs that are sticking out. And I want you, when I count to 3 and say lift, I want you to lift as hard as you can on each side." And Ed looked at her and he said, "Mom, we can't lift 3 tons. And then Mother prayed again. But before she prayed, she looked at her children and she said, "If Jesus wants this hay in the barn before the rainstorm comes tonight, then he'll help you. If he doesn't want that, then we'll just have to unload all the hay." Well, by this time, Alice was crying. Alice was probably a little over 10. And Mother said, "Alice, please don't fall apart right now. I need you to help me." So the 2 kids went and they got a hold of those log poles that were sticking out. And Mother started to count. 1, 2, 3, lift, lift. And those kids got a hold of those poles tightly and they lifted as hard as they could lift. And to their amazement, they lifted it, and Mother immediately pulled her leg out. Well, when Mother had her leg out, they set that down. And Ed, he turned to Alice and he said, "It was almost like it jumped up in the air when we went to lift." And Alice was so stunned she couldn't even talk. She just shook her head yes. Well, Mother's leg was totally raw from the ankle all the way to the hip. It had just scraped off all the skin. But the bone wasn't broken. Mother wasn't broken. Well, then they prayed again. And they thanked Jesus for saving Mother's life and making it so she didn't have a lot of injuries. And they thanked Jesus for helping them lift. Whether it was angels that had flown down and helped them lift, we don't know. Or maybe Jesus gave those two children super strength. Whatever, those children that day had a 3-ton miracle. We serve a wonderful, great God. Thank you, boys and girls, and I'll see you next week. Bye-bye now.